I can't even imagine. Have you heard those words and thought, neither can I? But then, it happened. Life took a turn you weren't expecting, and somehow you kept going. You are not alone. Your story matters, and we're here to talk about it. We're two moms, lifelong best friends, and we know what it's like when life throws the unexpected our way. Here we share real stories of struggle, strength, and hope. Because through every challenge, a new path unfolds, and where hardship meets strength, purpose is found. Welcome to episode 23 of I Can't Even Imagine. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Victoria. Today we're honored to sit down with Claribel Coriano. She's not only a survivor of intense trauma and domestic violence, but also a Christian life coach with a master's in marriage and family therapy, and the host of the Be an Encourager podcast. Claribel brings raw honesty and deep wisdom to this conversation as she shares her personal journey, one that includes the struggles of young motherhood, the emotional toll of abuse, and the painful work of healing while raising her 4 sons. She talks openly about the role faith played in her recovery, the misconceptions around trauma, and what it really takes to break generational cycles of pain. This episode is for anyone who feels stuck, exhausted, or unsure how to move forward. Claribel's story reminds us that transformation is possible, even in the darkest moments, and that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means rising. So grab a cup of tea, get cozy, and join us for this powerful conversation about courage, community, and the kind of hope that can change everything.
Claribel, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. So your story is a powerful one. So for those just meeting you, what is one thing you want them to know right away about you beyond your titles?
Beyond my title, that I am a survivor, that I have been able to, by the grace of God, first of all, been able to learn how to thrive and learn from my experience and survive many different things. And I want to encourage everyone to do the same, that you're capable and that you're not defined by trauma.
So you describe your journey as from trauma to triumph. So when did you first realize that your pain could have a greater purpose?
Well, that's a great question, by the way. That took a lot of introspection, a lot of self-awareness, learning throughout the years in my healing journey, that was indeed what it was for, that everything that I went through had a purpose. And I learned from also learning what it was, because at first I didn't know that it was trauma. I didn't know that it was, they had to do with trauma. So by learning how to heal, and in my healing journey, I, learned about myself and got to the root problem of, searching within and finding the root cause of what caused the trauma. So I had to do a lot of research. I had to do a lot of learning. I had to do a lot of introspection in me. And I also had to work with therapists and life coaches and learn about how to heal from all that. And I hope that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think was your biggest source of trauma that you had to work through the most?
While I went through childhood trauma and it was very intensive, going through domestic violence, it was like reopening that wound and then adding to it. So it's more of a complex trauma. So I will say that going through domestic violence had more of a negative effect in my life than the childhood, or maybe the impact. Let me put it this way. The level of impact that it affected me in my health, it affected me in my mental health, my emotions,
right,
and basically everything. But I didn't quite yet know that this is what it was, that it was complex trauma. I did not know that. And through my healing journey, I learned that this is what it is and how to work on, healing.
When we had spoken to you before, you had mentioned that it was like a 14-year relationship you had come out of. And I'm curious to know, what did the relationship dynamic look like? And what was it for you that you said, I'm done with this?
Domestic violence, it's it's a very difficult dynamic to understand, because many people, the first thing that they will say, why did you stay? If it was me, I would not stay. Or if it was me, I would fight back.
Right.
However, when you are involved and you're there in that type of relationship, in let's say, for instance, I would say there was a lot of precipitating factors of me staying and trying to work the marriage out. Some were because of culture, some were because of my my Christian background. I wanted to keep my marriage, and I thought, maybe one day he'll change. Maybe one day he'll treat me right. Maybe one day this person is going to become the husband that I visualized when we first met. However, that's not the case with domestic violence. There's some cycles that you go through, and things may be okay, for a few weeks. Then all of a sudden, the next month, it's like a volcano. So with that being said, it makes you feel like you're walking in eggshells. And it also makes you feel like hypervigilant because you really don't know when they're going to strike. And whether it is emotional, verbally, mentally, it's just like you're not sure which one he's going to hit today.
Mm-hmm.
There is one dynamic that I like to speak about, and that is, I call it the key phenomenon. The person used to hide his keys and then say that I misplaced them or I took them or the kids took them. And it was a psychology that worked so well. This is how it helps us understand the dynamic of domestic violence. If the person will swear up and down that I did it, that I took it, that I misplaced them, that I hid it, that the kids took it and hid it. I call it the phenomenon because he will react by emptying out the drawers, taking everything out, making a mess, while he's looking for his keys, while all the time he had his keys. He knew where they were. To have an excuse to leave the house. And basically, I started noticing the patterns that it always happened like on a Saturday. Saturday was the family day. So that gave him an excuse to take off and do whatever he wanted to do because he was also very unfaithful.
Right, because now he's hidden the keys so he can start a fight with you because, obviously you did something to the keys.
Yes.
Because he's really just wanting to get out and away from you guys and philander or do whatever it is that he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so by him hiding the keys and causing this huge ruckus and this huge fight, now he can be so angry that he can leave and get his way. That's intense.
Mm-hmm. So that's why I call it the key phenomenon. And I like to use that analogy because there's certain little things, there's subtle things that they do. I'm not speaking bad about this person. I want everyone to know that I have to share my story because it's my truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I have read a quote by Iralis Romero that goes like this. The courage it takes to share your story may be the very thing someone else needs to open their heart to hope. And I always use this quote as a reflection because it takes a lot of courage.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of bravery, and it takes being vulnerable because in reality, you want the perfect marriage. You don't want to have to talk about this history. In the past, it took me a lot of years, a lot of healing to be able to say, why should I make this be like they want it to be, like it's not a reality that it never happened? Because that's psychological games. That's gaslighting you. And that's torture because I know my truth. So I use this quote because it's so important to be able to share your story and really recognize the red flags, the things that they do, those subtle behavior, because there's some that are subtle and the patterns, they change. They can go from being physical. In my case, it started physical. Then all of a sudden it started with mental abuse. Then it started with emotional abuse, financial abuse, and you name it. So what does that do to a person? I'm very vulnerable, so I want to speak the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It caused ruckus in my life. It caused chaos. It caused disruption in my emotion. It causes dysregulation because it was complex trauma. They have you going up and down, and you really don't know where there's going to be like a stable homeostasis in your life. You feel, okay, maybe things may work out. Maybe things get better.
He's changing.
Yes, we keep that hope that they're changing.
Well, because I imagine he was probably very, the red flags in the beginning, very charming, told you everything you've ever wanted to hear, every movie you ever saw or romance novel you ever read.
Mm-hmm.
He was the guy in that. So you fell in love with this guy. Then little things start to happen and you're like, oh no, that's not the real him. I know the real him.
Mm-hmm.
And then before you know it, it is completely unraveled. And that real, quote unquote, real him that you thought you knew was just a facade. And now you really know the real him. Was it just the 14 years of all of this and the patterns you started noticing where you're like, I feel like I need to be done with this? Or was there something very specific that happened that kind of just blew the whole thing up and you said, I'm done?
There were different things that happened throughout the relationship. I tried to also stick around because of my kids, my younger two, those were his children. So I tried to, stay because of the kids. I needed a father. And I thought I was doing a good thing when it turned out that that wasn't a good thing. The constant patterns of cheating, it was beyond.
Yeah.
And again, because I was in a domestic violence, they break you down so bad that you almost feel like, gosh, there's got to be something maybe wrong with me.
Right. He's the best thing you'll ever have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he probably made you think that you are the reason that he's going and cheating.
Right.
Yes. You're fat. You don't dress this way. You don't do this. You don't do that. Yes, I heard them all. And I have to laugh because the level of audacity that it takes for these people that are also involved with him.
Mm-hmm.
One showed up in my house, and that was a horrible experience in the sense that why should I have been put through that? I didn't deserve that. I was a good wife. I was a good mother.
Yeah.
So that was one of the precipitating factors that got me to thinking this is, it's not getting better. It's just getting worse. The constant infidelity.
Well, his infidelity ultimately was a favor to you in that way, right? That it was a way for you to start really seeing that this is obviously not the person that you want to be around anymore. Because without the infidelity, maybe the constant roller coaster of emotional abuse and all of these things, you may have continued to sweep that under the rug for a little while longer. But the infidelity and bringing somebody else to your home was, he was doing you a favor at that point, making you so upset that you would leave.
Yes, you're absolutely right on that.
So how did you leave? Did you file for divorce or did he fight you on it?
Because it got to the level that now the last one that he was involved with, he decided to move with her. So he left.
Okay.
Oh, good. I mean, for you, that's great.
Blessing in disguise.
Yes, that was his new supply.
Yes.
I filed for the divorce, but then the divorce became a battle, 3 years and a half trying to get a divorce. And that was, difficult because it was very expensive divorce. And I didn't fight for anything. I just okay, I just want my freedom. Give me my freedom.
Yeah.
I needed to start working on my healing.
So I know that you had mentioned earlier that you are a Christian. You have your own podcast, and that's a big part of it. Can you want to tell us a little bit about how the role that your faith played in your healing and getting out of this relationship?
Yes, it played a very important role because while I was not attending church back then, when I was in this relationship, I did visit. On and off because he always had a problem with that too. So I did visit church and I always pray, and God had used people. One person in particular did not know me, and this person stopped me in the supermarket, and she told me some things that only God would know.
Oh, wow.
And that was like a warning from God, that God was trying to save me from bigger problems and bigger things. And this lady told me things that I was, oh my God. The impact it had on me was that I was crying. I was bawling, crying, and my knees were shaking. I couldn't even do my groceries. I had to go back home because it was so impactful. A few years after that, I was attending church, two individual husband and wife that used to lead a study. they did a study with me. It was like they opened my eyes. And God doesn't want us to stay in bad relationships. God doesn't want us to stay in abusive relationships, in patterns of infidelity. God doesn't want that. He doesn't want us to be hurting. He doesn't want us to be suffering. And that day to see that this is not healthy, there are people that need to fix themselves with whatever they're going through and whatever they're suffering or whatever they're struggling with, and cannot show up as good husbands. They cannot show up as good parents because they have all this stuff that they need to work on. Mm-hmm. That study allowed me to see that I was in a very bad relationship. And they were totally very honest with me. They were both doctors. So they were like, we want to help you. You're in a bad relationship. This is not healthy for you. It's not healthy for your kids. Because, they knew, some dynamics of domestic violence. So they helped me open up my eyes more, although I stay in the relationship. But again, there is a thing called trauma bonding that keep you attached to that trauma. And like I said before, those periods of going up and down in the relationship, separating, then coming back, separating again and coming back, it sort of like creates this cognitive disturbance in your frontal lobe, because it makes you not forget specifically, I forgot the term that they use, but it makes you accept them back. Mm-hmm. And like nothing happened. And that's what used to happen to me. When I learned about this, I go, oh my God, this is why every time, I was giving an opportunity, I was getting back, I was trying, because it's almost that glue. It's like you pull the glue and then it goes back in. Would that make sense?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. That's how I felt. And it sort of keeps you going back in.
Right.
And it's that it causes a cognitive dysfunction in your brain that makes you sort of kind of like forget what they did and start like fresh again. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because like I said, I had a research and I had it, deep, very deep as to why did I stay? Because I would not tolerate it. I would not tolerate disrespect from other people.
Yeah.
Why was I staying in this type of relationship?
Did you go through any kind of like phase where you felt guilty that you stayed for so long, like beat yourself up about it?
Yes. During my divorce, it just made me like sort of crash.
Yeah.
I got very, very depressed. Like, how dare I stay in this bad relationship and hurt myself and hurt my kids this way? So I was carrying a lot of shame. Why did I let it? I'm an intelligent woman, questioning myself. And, we're starting to believe at that point that it was my fault, like there was something wrong with me. So it worked on me, because they leave you. By the time they leave you, they don't leave you in one piece. They leave you sort of broken.
Yeah.
Leave you like, okay, she's disposed. Let's dispose this person. They will not even acknowledge you afterwards, in the sense like if we have to speak something about the children, oh my goodness, that will be such a struggle. You don't have to call me. I don't want to talk to you. It's your fault that this is going on with them. You deal with it. And to hear all these things, it was like, wow. Because one thing, when a man leaves a woman, but leaving your children, it's not the correct thing to do.
Mm-mm. Right.
It is not the correct thing. So I struggled with that. And what I did was after that I did not keep no communication. And then the person that he was with called me, also insult me, because I was trying to resolve an issue in regards to my children. It was the worst disrespect ever. I will not tolerate that ever in my life. Mm-hmm. And I had to just stay quiet. Like I said, they leave you broken. They leave you in shambles. They leave you financially destroyed. And then they say, okay, she's crazy. You see how she is?
Right.
You see how she is?
Right.
So you know what I learned? I learned to resolve everything without having to involve that person, and just take my kids to counseling and make sure that they heal from the scars that it caused.
And to not repeat the cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Not to repeat the cycle.
Because are they girls or boys?
They're 4 boys.
4 boys. Wow. Yeah. So you don't want to be raising future abusers. Mm-hmm. And if it were girls, you don't want to teach them that that's how to accept love from a man. It's a dynamic that you've got to navigate, especially with 4 boys. Did therapy seem to work well for them?
Yes, therapy worked. Of course, they had to go through their own healing journey, and I have been there for them anytime anything happened. I have always been there emotionally. And the things that I was recommending to them was that they had to have a conversation with this individual. Every single one of them were able to confront him in different ways, because one of them did I don't know how many pages of a letter, but he just like poured himself in that letter that he wrote, and let him know, you hurt me, you hurt my mother, it affected me this way. They were really vulnerable, they were really open, they cried, and let him know that this is damaging. It was damaging. If it was damaging to me, it was damaging to them.
May I ask their age ranges when they did this, when they confronted this person?
Some of them were teenagers, and then the other 2 of them confronted when they were like young adults. And I have to thank God they turn out to be very good husbands, very good fathers.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, because it could go one of 2 ways. Be a good man and not do what you saw, or do exactly what you saw and continue the cycle.
Mm-hmm. But we have to break those cycles. I encourage anyone that's going through this, if you can get out early on in the relationship, do it, because the reparation on the healing will take longer, and it will be more intensive for them if you wait. The longer you wait, do it while they're young, because when they're children, it's much easier to repair those wounds. When they're young teenagers, adults, they're going to do things that, of course, because of the anger of going through those type of things,
Yeah.
but you have to guide them. I've been a very responsible person. I was a young mom, and all I focused was on my children. That I had this task that I didn't want my children to go through the things that I went through. So I read every book that I needed to, child psychology, adolescent psychology, and I even took college courses also. So I know how to deal with my children. And I invest a lot of time and effort in making sure that I can speak to them, because, of course, even though they're boys, they always confided in me. Whenever they had their first date, any issues with their girlfriend or anything, who they will call their mom.
Aw,
That's so sweet.
that's great.
That is so sweet.
Yes. And I was the first one to know when they were getting married, when, if they were having a baby or any kind of, promotions or anything. It's just, because I wanted them to have a positive life. I didn't want them to be scarred by everything that we went through. But they're very good kids. They're very smart kids. And they were able to work through all that. They were able to, turn it around. And let me tell you, I'm super proud of my 4 boys. I could not ask for better kids. Well, I don't want to get emotional, but I am super proud. Mm-hmm.
That's okay.
That's so sweet.
Is one of them is a veteran?
Yes. One of my son, the second oldest, fought in Afghanistan, and he is a disabled veteran.
Wow. So do you think with your being a mother and having your kids while going through this, do you think that having the kids made it easier for you to make that decision, or made it harder for you to make that decision? Because I do know, in talking to a lot of women who've been in similar situations, sometimes it's the kids that they feel kind of hold them back, because they're trying to make it work for the kids, like you were saying earlier, or they get stuck in this mentality of, well, I can't financially support my children without him. So I'm stuck.
I would say it was 50-50. I wanted to stay because of the children, because I wanted them to have a father, because I wanted him to be there. But then I kept also analyzing that emotionally he wasn't there. They were already growing up. They were already being teenagers, and they needed like that father figure to be there emotionally. Because the time of teenager is the time of, they call it the storm and stress, where they go through different things and they really need that guidance. It did keep me in the marriage, but then I was seeing how they now were saying, why do you take this? Or one of them in particular, when one of the time that it was a very difficult domestic violence situation, he stood up to him. And that was like, It's just like click in my brain. I cannot allow this. I have to get out of this. And that's where I was starting to detach more and more and more in trying to figure out what would be the best way. But God heard my prayers and he ended up leaving. My son was already in high school. He was a weightlifter. He was in the wrestling team and he used to play football as well. So he was a big kid. And he said, I'm not going to tolerate that. So I was seeing that my kids were becoming more aware that they're not going to tolerate somebody mistreating their mother. So I said, no, I have to leave the situation before it gets worse.
I'm glad that he left with his new conquest, because so many times women are stuck in a domestic violence situation, and the most dangerous time for them is when they're trying to leave. That's why it's so important to have a plan in place, trusted people, and, maybe squirrel away some money or something where you can have a solid plan in place to exit this relationship, since it is such a dangerous time. So really, he did you a service in deciding to leave with his next unfortunate victim.
Mm.
Yes, it was kind of like a relief for me. It was like, okay, it's finally over.
All right, so we want to get into what brought you into the world of life coaching. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
I have worked 29 years in the social services environment in many different roles, and I was in the helping profession for many years, working with a diverse population, with the homeless. When I first started, I started working during the HIV epidemic. So I worked for 3 years with that population. And then after that, I went to work with the homeless. All the years of experience, I also have my master's in marriage and family therapy. I had always been helping people. People always were approaching me whenever they have any issues or any problems. They will call me or even stop me, let's say, for instance, in the supermarket or at a store, and just share their problems. And I've always gave them some feedback based on what they were going through, but in a different manner, not like a clinical. I figured, that was a good field to go into. And I started working in getting my accreditations in life coaching. I started with 2 certificates in 2011. And then in 2015, I obtained my 1-year life coaching certification. And 2018, I did a women's empowerment life coaching certification. And just recently, I added a trauma-informed certification. And I opened my business in 2023. Right now, I help individuals who have gone through trauma, domestic violence, or single mothers that have parenting issues, or, they might be experiencing all three: domestic violence, trauma, and parenting issues. So I help them learn new ways that they can thrive, learn new ways that they can become better parents. And I also do work with individuals who are making career transitions. So I help them also with that, explore if they want to stay in the job that they're in, or they want to explore other careers, or perhaps maybe starting their own business. So I help individuals in those areas.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is really great.
So how long after, your divorce was finalized and, you've gone through your personal healing journey, how long before you started doing the life coaching and helping others officially?
So I had already been helping individuals at a different level, more intense, more clinical. Then the life coaching in 2021, when I moved from Connecticut to Florida, I retired from the position that I had. Then I started working on the life coaching and opening up my business in 2023. So I made a shift. I made a career shift.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can really help people, and you can speak on that to people who are trying to make a career shift themselves.
Yes, exactly. I can share, how I was preparing myself, because I just didn't go and say I'm going to be doing life coaching. I still was holding my job. I had my responsibility in my job. However, I was preparing by taking certifications, going to the school. And then when I was ready to retire, then I got fully into the field.
So I understand that you call yourself, you're a certified transformational Christian life coach. So what's the difference between transformation and recovery in your view?
From the life coaching school that I got my certification in life coaching, it was transformational life coaching. That means it's using a holistic view of environmental factors and upbringing, looking at everything in a scope, looking at everything that the person can need to maybe tap into change or maybe causing an obstacle or barrier. So looking at the person as a whole and involving all those areas that encompasses their life. That's transformational life coaching. And then teaching them ways that they can take small steps on their own, because life coaching is not telling them you got to go this route. The person holds the blueprint of where they want to go. We just help them find the answers within that they can themselves realize, this is what I want to do. Or, that sounds like something. And there was, when you're life coaching, it's remarkable because the person will say, you know what, I never thought of this way, but, this is what I always been wanting to do, or I can do this. I can take the first step. They make realization. We celebrate that. As a coach, we celebrate that because we allow the person to find their own answer. And that's what life coaching is all about. Because in reality, like when you tell a person you need to do this, guess what? It's paradoxical. The person will probably end up doing the opposite.
It's like,
Right.
like children.
Yes, exactly. Or they'll say yes, but if they're not committed, or they haven't contemplated making changes, they're not going to follow through. So with life coaching, you explore those areas, making sure that the client is committed, that they're contemplating making those change, that they're committed to taking those action steps and working on whatever it is that they want to achieve or they want to work on or their goals. And it's up to them. With the helping profession, we're just in the clinical, we're just managing and monitoring a client that, may have issues, but they're connected with clinical, they're connected with therapists. So it's just totally two different things. In recovery, let's say, for instance, a person that has gone through trauma, when you're in your healing journey, you're working in that recovery. And that requires to accept the past, but not allow it to define you. So you're in recovery, and recovery is an ongoing process, just like the healing process. So you're still recovering. And that means that you're no longer reacting, but you're responding. You're learning how to respond to situations, especially if you have a domestic violence past. You want to learn how to self-regulate and not allow those emotions and those feelings that it brought you to allow you to react. But you will respond. You will embrace that this is what you're feeling. Process it and self-regulate and allow it to work that process and learn how to manage it instead of reacting. Because in the past, if you don't work on your healing process, you're more apt to react emotionally. Anything can trigger you. Anything can maybe set you off. But once you learn that you are in total control of your healing, you're able to self-regulate and say, no, I'm not going to react. I'm going to respond to these feelings that I'm feeling, and my past does not define me. I am a healed person. It's almost like, positive affirmation, using positive affirmation within yourself as you recover.
So the recovery is like the journey, and then the transformation is like the final product.
Yes. What you become once you heal. And
yeah,
it's a difference because you can still speak about your story even though you're not completely healed. But when you're completely healed, it's like, I want to share my testimony.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't have no fear. You have that courage. You want to help people and not go through what you went through. And you want to help people recover, and you want to help people learn how to heal. That's the focus, to help others learn how to heal, because we are all capable and we're not taught how to heal.
Yeah.
We're not taught how to heal. Nobody tells you, you got to heal from that because, you went through major trauma. You have to heal, and this is how you do it. So teaching others that, yes, if I was able to do it, you can certainly learn how to heal. And like I mentioned before, it's an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing process. There's going to be good days. There's going to be bad days, but it's okay not to be okay in certain days. Learn how to regroup yourself and self-regulate during those bad days and say, okay, I'm better now. I'm standing up. I'm rising. I'm going to continue in my healing journey. And that's the focus, to continue healing, because complex trauma, it's one of those newest things that was recently added and accepted in the mental health arena just recently. I think it's 2015 or 2018, if I'm not mistaken, when it was embraced, that there is such a thing as complex trauma.
Isn't it CPTSD or something? Like it's like a PTSD with an additional letter in the beginning.
Yes, CPTSD, complex PTSD. They found out that it's different. It's not the same thing as the regular trauma, because the regular trauma was associated mostly with individuals that went through the war, veterans that went to war, or maybe perhaps a disaster, but not such a bad accident.
More of like a single event that, regardless of the length of the event, like a single happenstance versus different traumas that have occurred throughout your life, multitude of different kinds of trauma.
Yes, it's
okay.
Exactly like what you just said. The complex trauma is a repeated trauma.
Yeah.
And you may repeat those trauma in different forms, like childhood trauma, then adolescent trauma, and then domestic violence. It's one of the categories. Childhood trauma is another one. Trafficking, human trafficking falls into that complex trauma. And major disaster, repeated major disasters. And that also causes the complex trauma. So it's, again, a new thing that they're dealing with now, that they now can say, you know what, this is what that person's been through. This is what that person, it has a name. I don't accept it as a label. We don't accept it as a label, but it's something that happened, and because of the things that you went through, that's what it's called. But it involves a lot of different, symptoms, and, of course, from the years of the length of the traumas and the intensity,
right?
The repeated, traumas, that makes it a little bit more difficult and more challenging for some individuals.
What do you think are some misconceptions that people have about healing from trauma?
I believe that there's several. If there are individuals that may not have the empathy or the listening skills to be able to hear someone when they are speaking about trauma, and they say, get over it. Get over it. You're still living in the past, or, okay, that happened to you. Get over it. You were a kid. Outgrow it.
Right.
I'm going to be totally honest. That's what people say. But they're not trying to be understanding that this is what it is. It's trauma. Validate the person. Okay. Nobody that experiences trauma is looking for attention or admiration or anything like that. You know how difficult it is for a person that has gone through trauma, verbalizing what they've been through? It's very difficult. So having someone that is empathetic, a good listener, and validating that indeed you went through that.
Yeah.
That's what they need. It's not acceptable to some people. They just say, get over it. You went through that. Just pick up the pieces and just, But they also have learned that with trauma, that's why it's so complex. Many people internalize it. So when they internalize it, guess what it does? It affects your body. So it gets stored in the body. So no matter what, you may not be talking about the trauma, but the trauma is stuck inside of you. And it shows up. It manifests in autoimmune disorder, digestive problem, cognitive, learning disability, even causes your brain to shrink. So it has such major effect, and people do not understand that connection. They just say, oh, that person went through all that. It's time that they get better. However, they're not understanding that all these things happen because of the trauma that they experience. And internalizing the trauma is not healthy. It's better to be open and start working on that and start healing. I call it the peeling of an onion. And you peel the onion until you get to the core, and you're going to be crying because, the onion makes you cry. You're going to be, very emotional. You're going to have a lot of different emotions, a lot of different feelings. That's what trauma is. You have those layers.
That's right.
Peel them back and go get to the core and start healing at the core. That's where you want to go. And it's a painful process. Yes, I have to admit, because I had to do it. I had to do it. It's a painful process, and it's really painful. It's very painful. But one of the important things about this is you have to want to be healed.
Yeah.
And you also need it. So there's two things. You want it and you need it. It's like when a person gets to a stage and you say, enough is enough. I don't want to go through this anymore. I want to heal from this. What can I do to heal from this? I want to get to the bottom of this and finally pull all those roots out and finally get delivered from all that, because trauma also has a spiritual component, a physical component, and a mental component, and it wreaks havoc with your emotions, because that's where the trauma gets, I'm not going to use that big word because
I don't even know if I can say it.
Compartmentalized.
Yeah, compartmentalized.
Compartmentalized. Putting it into different compartments. Compartmentalized.
Yes. Yes. So that's what trauma does, especially with childhood trauma. It's like different files. I call it like a computer. You have different files. That's what trauma does, different files, until you're able to pick up all those pieces like a puzzle and put them all together and now process the whole thing. So they have to work little by little on those compartments, heal from one and then go to the next and things like that. Because trauma is very complex and it causes, like I said, a lot of physical ailments. And many individuals don't, they might have compartmentalize the trauma so deep within them that they have it so hidden that they don't know how to bring it out, or they may have something that they have repressed, and they're going through all these different physical things.
And they probably just think, oh, well, something's wrong with me. I just have a health problem. You know?
That happens a lot, I think. And I think it's getting better. Our culture is getting a lot better with recognizing trauma and being able to speak about it just outwardly, because there was, such a time where everything's swept under the rug. Don't talk about it. What would the neighbors think, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like a lot of people still, at least what we come across in what we do, and the people who reply to our social media posts and they say, I'd love to apply to your podcast, but I've listened to a few episodes and my story is next to nothing compared to what some of these people have gone through. And something that Stephanie and I like to make sure that people understand is that there's no comparison with trauma. That we're not trying to one up each other on our stories. Because what's hard for you is hard for you. There's no comparison is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Hard is hard, regardless.
No matter what, trauma is very difficult, no matter, the level of trauma that they experience. And I like to think of it this way. There's always one person or two persons that need to hear it, no matter what, because they might be going through that type of trauma. So voicing what you went through, it's healing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we started this podcast. I mean, that was like the whole inspiration behind it. It was like, we have our own stories and we know each other's stories because we were with each other through those. But like, we really fully, I don't think, understood the trauma. Mine happened first and then hers, but like we came to a much clearer understanding of each other after we both went through it,
and then shared our experiences together in this platform in this way.
And even though our experiences, the level of trauma were so incredibly different, there was still so many things that we like bonded over because we came to this new understanding.
And it's the feelings. We have both have had some similar feelings, even though what happened to her son and my daughter were vastly different. The feeling of being a mother, watching your child suffer, or the feeling of being almost like they're, you don't, sometimes as a mom that has a child who's experienced trauma, especially in a medical way, sometimes it's really hard to admit that kid still annoys you sometimes. You don't want to admit that, right, out loud, because people are going to judge you, because you should be lucky that they're even here. And we've been able to bond over that because sometimes kids are annoying. You're frazzled. You've got so much going on and you love them, endlessly. And still, sometimes they just annoy you so much. And that's okay too. And just being able to talk about that with somebody and shedding light on how there's so much normal within, just feelings as a mom, especially when you've got a kid who's going through something that, is difficult. So that's something that we've really, we wanted to shed light on too within our platform.
We really did not expect the feedback that we got. I mean, we were kind of talking about starting a podcast for a long time prior. And, we just never really had a clear direction on where we were going with it. We just know that, we love being around each other. We've been best friends for, over 30 years. And we like to talk. And, why not just try something a little fun and different? And then when this kind of came together and the feedback that we got from, our local community of mothers was like, wow, this is something that could be really impactful and actually help people. And so which leads me to our actually next question. What, in your words, what do you think makes storytelling such a powerful healing tool for both the listener and the speaker?
Wow, that's a great question. Storytelling, it's essential in healing because it's both ways, from the person that's sharing the story to the people that are listening to the story. It's healing. Every time you're able to share your story, you heal. You heal more and more. And knowing that other people are also benefiting from hearing to your story, it's also helping you not only them heal, but also helps you heal too, because that's the end goal, is to share your story as much as possible so that people don't have to go through what you went through. And the focus should be in healing. The focus is on what can I share my story that can help individuals heal? What can I share from my story that can allow people to see that these things do happen? Like those challenging things with children. Oh my goodness, if I were to share some of those stories, I don't know how I made it. Children don't come with a manual.
No.
And we learn sometimes through trial and error.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's been my entire parenting journey, is trial and error.
I feel the same way. Believe you me, I feel the same way. I have 4 boys, and it was challenging for me being so young. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but when I got married the first time, I was only 16. I had a child.
Wow.
As a teenager. I didn't get to go to a prom. I didn't get to socialize. I didn't get to do so many things the young girls get to do. I was a very good student in school, but I had to learn from that lesson. So I have things to teach other people, not to give up. Because when I was 19 years old, I believe, I signed up for a program that did training. I got my GED. I got my citizenship. I went to that program and I came out as the poster young single mother who accomplished taking this training and graduating and doing so well.
Wow.
So I came out in the newspaper. That's a story to tell somebody, look, when you feel like giving up, don't give up, because God always opened doors.
Yeah.
And I continue from there. Then, so your story, your specific story, there's always someone needing to hear that story, what you got to bring to the table, what you have to share, how you can help them see and learn a new way to heal, because they might have tried different things and they're not getting nowhere. And by listening to your story, they're going to say, wow, that was so inspiration, so encouraging. I want to try this. I want to do this. So it worked on me. Now I feel more equipped and I feel more empowered, that I can do this. And that's the whole message that we want to bring across.
As a life coach, you hear and guide and help people, help themselves through a lot of what I would imagine are pretty traumatic things. And how is it that what do you do to avoid, burnout when you've not only lived trauma, but now you're carrying the stories of others?
Like any field that you're in, self-care is super important. Having, your schedule, that you take your time to do the things that keep you healthy, like eating healthy.
Mm-hmm.
My time, like my devotional time in the morning, that's sacred. Nobody messes with that time.
Yeah.
Reading my Bible and praying, that's essential. In taking the time to exercise, that self-care part. Now, the other part that you have to learn is that it is not a clinical. So you cannot go you cannot allow the client to get so deep into their trauma when you're life coaching, because it's not a clinical setting. In the clinical setting, they're equipped to do that through the insurance, there's a lot of different components as to, the clinical is why it's so different. With life coaching, you're teaching and guiding clients to guide them on their own selves.
I see.
If that makes sense. So with that being said, you cannot allow that. They have to be at a different level in their trauma. They have to be already healed or been working in their healing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's totally different, because, there's triggers that can come about if they're not completely healed, that, life coach, it's not the setting, it's not, especially when the client is very vulnerable. So you have to be very careful and know your boundaries.
Yeah.
Boundaries are very big for me, like boundaries, this is what we're working on, and not allow those conversations to get diverted to, deeper than they need to. It's about healing.
Sure.
And applying those things that they can continue to learn new ways of healing.
If someone listening is at their very lowest point right now, not coming from a life coach perspective, but coming from a woman who has dealt with trauma, what would you say to them, especially if it's a woman maybe in a domestic violence situation and she's just at her very lowest point? What would you say to them right now if you could just speak to their heart?
If you are struggling in a domestic violence situation, find support and get connected. Whether if you're a believer, get connected with someone who's a leader in church that is equipped, first of all, because they have to be equipped. Not everyone in the churches is equipped to deal with giving, even just being a listening ear, they may not even be equipped for that when it comes to domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to be equipped. So getting connected is the first thing. Finding the supports that they need.
Right.
And start preparing. If you're looking to leave the relationship, being very cautious. Documentation is a big one that I always recommend, because I did that. I started getting prepared my documentation, because depending on what they're going through, depending who's the person, depending if, the relationship, if you have to go through divorce, you're going to need all that documentation. You're going to need all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Taking step towards leaving the situation. But if your situation is one that is of emergence, that it is very volatile, that it is dangerous, and that you feel unsafe, don't hesitate. Break away from that. Don't stay and wait till something really horrible happens. I'd like to share a story. There was in Connecticut, there was a case of this lady that was in a very volatile domestic violence situation. And she kept calling the police.
Yep.
And again, because you know that dynamic of domestic violence, the police came, they never hardly believed her. They thought she was frazzled, she was this, she was that. The guy was actually beating her, and they were even noticing bruises and things like that. But they always, you know how it is, if they're not equipped and they don't know about the domestic violence, they'll go, oh, it's a family thing, it's a relationship problem, it's just a fight. So it so happened that one time that she called the police, the guy has stabbed her like I don't know how many times.
Oh my God.
And they actually implemented a law because of her case.
Wow.
He almost left her for dead.
Wow.
There's two things that failed here. The people that were supposed to protect her, the police, because she called and they didn't come till after, a few hours after she had been stabbed. She could have died. They didn't respond. They were not equipped to respond. And they did not intervene fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
So they created a law in Connecticut, and that's why the police department get trained on domestic violence, how to intervene, not just listen to the bell, but now they send two cops that are equipped in intervening, one for the male and one for the female. So that way they don't take sides, because that was another thing that was going on. If they were kind of like the same view as the men, they will take the men's side.
Right.
So because of that law, that case, that she kept calling the police, calling for help, but she also stayed in that bad relationship, knowing that it was only getting worse and it got to that point. If it's so horrible like that, don't stay in that relationship, because listen, if they tell you they're going to kill you and they just say it like nothing and they don't even have empathy, one day they're capable of doing that in their anger, in their rage.
Absolutely.
So that's one thing that I would recommend. Do not stay in an unhealthy relationship. If you're a believer, there's a lot of misconceptions in a lot of the churches when they're guiding individuals in terms of the man is the head of the household. Submission.
Right. I hear this a lot in like the Christian, I'm in some like Christian women Facebook groups,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll see a lot of women in there venting about their relationships, and the amount of times that I see women that are so like, you have to do whatever he says, and they're so like submissive, and they like fit that mold of this
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, this biblical idea of what a woman's supposed to be, but yet like ignoring the red flags that are actually happening here. Like you were talking about earlier, like God doesn't want you to be in a relationship where you're getting beaten. Like,
right.
Like there are legit like biblical reasons for divorce. Like it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's frustrating to me to read a lot of these stories.
Yes, it is to me too. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because one of my connections that I interviewed for my podcast, it's domestic kindness. So she teaches the churches, because like I said before, not everyone in the churches is equipped to handle those things, because they're under this doctrine, submissive. Submissive doesn't give a license to be hurting people, to be hurting the woman.
Right.
No.
And if you read Genesis, when God created the woman, it was to be that equal partner.
Right.
And for some reason, there's a lot of misconception when they are teaching that part of submission. Mm-hmm. Submission does not mean, that one person is greater than the other. It means that they're equal, they're balanced.
Right. Do whatever he says just because he's the man.
That's why I said that not everyone is equipped to intervene during crisis of domestic violence.
Yeah.
Because they will tell the person, I just prayed about it.
Yeah.
He's the man. One of the things I heard, what did you do to him?
Oh, geez.
Or what didn't you do?
Right. Like victim blaming.
So those, again, misconceptions.
Like, how is this your fault? No.
Exactly.
Reminds me too, where it also says, husbands, that means you love your wives just as Christ loved the church. He gave up his life for her. So it's like completely ignoring that verse. That's the very next verse.
Exactly. Yes. That's a good verse to apply.
We have a shared mission. We talk a lot about survivorship. We talk a lot about hope. We talk a lot about finding purpose and healing being the really big one. So you yourself also have a podcast. So just real quick, I want you to just give us the name of your podcast, where people can find you, and then could you just rattle off to our listeners your website and any social contacts that you have for people to reach out to you?
Yes, certainly. So the name of my podcast is Be an Encourager. I started the podcast in 2021 after I moved from Connecticut to Florida. Being that during the pandemic, I saw a lot of people needing a lot of support, a lot of encouragement. So I took it upon myself, sending encouraging messages. And I said, but you know what? Maybe if I do a podcast, I can bring in people on different issues and we can talk about different issues and educate, inform, encourage. So it is very diverse because I bring people from many different field area, different jobs to speak an encouraging word on a topic that they choose, that they want the audience and the listener, that we know that it's a need. So I try to bring in individuals that can share those messages, those positive messages. It has been very, I will say, successful in a way because I have been able to connect with individuals from many different countries. That I have interviewed people from Australia, UK, Dubai, many different places that I didn't think, that I would be able to connect, but I haven't been able to.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. We're looking forward to being on your podcast next week.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I am so excited to have you both. Yes, definitely. My website is empowerglobalcoaching.com. And if they want to reach out to me, Claribel Coriano at empowerglobalcoaching.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor to share my story. God bless you. Have a blessed day.
Bye-bye, Claribel. Thank you. We're so grateful that you joined us today. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who might need it too. You can find us at ican'tevenimagine.com or connect with us on Facebook at ican'tevenimagine a podcast for moms or Instagram at ICEI_podcast.
And don't forget, there's purpose in your path, even if you can't see it yet.